Millionaire woman paid a poor waiter to be her date. His secret identity changed her life. Rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Victoria, Sterling's penthouse office on the 47th floor of the Manhattan skyscraper that bore her family's name. At 34, she had built Sterling Enterprises into a billion-dollar empire. But tonight, as she stared at the elegant invitation in her manicured hands, she felt more vulnerable than she had in years. The annual philanthropy gala, the most prestigious social event in New York's elite circles, was tomorrow night. Every major business leader, politician, and socialite would be there. And for the third year in a row, Victoria would be attending alone, subjecting herself to the pitying glances and whispered comments about the ice queen of Wall Street, who could conquer boardrooms but couldn't find love. Her assistant had already declined to accompany her as a friend, claiming a family emergency that Victoria suspected was fabricated. Her few acquaintances were either married, out of town, or had made it clear they found her too intimidating for casual friendship. The weight of her loneliness pressed down on her like a physical force. That's when desperation led her to an idea that would have seemed absurd just hours earlier. She needed someone presentable, charming, and completely removed from her social circle. Someone who wouldn't ask questions or have expectations beyond a single evening. The next day, Victoria found herself doing something she'd never done before, sitting in a modest diner in Brooklyn, far from the gleaming towers of her usual haunts. She had chosen this place specifically because it was ordinary, the kind of establishment where she could observe potential candidates without attracting attention. The diner buzzed with the lunch crowd, construction workers, students, elderly locals nursing coffee and sharing gossip. Victoria, dressed down in jeans and a simple sweater, felt oddly out of place in this world of genuine human connection. She watched the staff work, looking for someone who possessed the natural charisma and intelligence she would need. That's when she noticed him. The young man moved between tables with an easy confidence that caught her attention immediately. He was tall, probably in his late 20s, with dark hair that caught the light and warm brown eyes that seemed to genuinely connect with every customer he served. What struck her most was how he carried himself. There was something refined about his posture, the way he spoke to patrons, even the graceful way he balanced multiple plates. His name tag read Marcus, and Victoria found herself studying him with the same analytical intensity she brought to business negotiations. He was handsome in an understated way, with strong features and a smile that appeared genuine rather than practiced. More importantly, he seemed to have a natural ability to put people at ease, engaging in brief conversations that left customers visibly happier. Victoria noticed other details that intrigued her. Despite his uniform and humble work environment, there was something about Marcus that didn't quite fit. His vocabulary was more sophisticated than she expected, and she caught glimpses of expensive shoes beneath his worn work clothes. When he thought no one was watching, his posture straightened, and his expression became more contemplative, almost scholarly. After nearly 2 hours of observation, Victoria made her decision. She waited until the lunch rush subsided, then approached Marcus's section and requested a table. When he came over with his warm, professional smile, she felt a flutter of nervousness that surprised her. Marcus was even more impressive up close. His voice was cultured, his mannerisms polished in a way that suggested education and refinement. As he took her order for coffee and pie, Victoria found herself genuinely curious about his story. Who was this man, and what circumstances had brought him to this Brooklyn diner? The conversation began innocuously enough. Victoria complimented the service, mentioned she was new to the neighborhood, and gradually steered the discussion toward more personal topics. Marcus was reserved but polite, sharing that he was working his way through graduate school and had dreams of making a difference in the world. There was an intelligence in his eyes that made Victoria's pulse quicken, and she found herself drawn to his quiet confidence. This was not the desperate, eager-to-please personality she had expected to find. Marcus carried himself with a dignity that transcended his circumstances, and Victoria realized she was dealing with someone far more complex than she had anticipated. As the afternoon wore on, Victoria's plan began to feel more complicated than she had imagined. She had expected to find someone grateful for an easy payday, but Marcus seemed too proud, too self-possessed to be easily bought. When she finally worked up the courage to make her proposition, she chose her words carefully. The offer was simple: accompany her to a high-profile charity gala, pose as her date for the evening, and earn $5,000 for approximately 6 hours of work. She explained that she needed someone sophisticated enough to navigate high society but unconnected to her business world. Someone who could help her save face at an important social event. Marcus's reaction was not what she expected. Instead of jumping at the money, he studied her with those perceptive brown eyes, as if trying to understand not just what she was asking, but why she was asking it. His questions were thoughtful, showing genuine concern for her situation, rather than mere interest in the financial opportunity. Why was someone like her, clearly successful, intelligent, and attractive, unable to find a real date? What was so important about this particular event? Was she asking him to deceive people, or simply to accompany her? Victoria found herself being more honest than she had intended. She spoke about the pressure of being a woman in a male-dominated business world, the way her success had isolated her from genuine human connections. She explained how the business community watched her personal life like vultures, how every appearance was scrutinized and judged. Marcus listened without judgment, and Victoria realized that his questions came from a place of genuine concern, rather than mere curiosity. There was something about his presence that made her feel safe enough to reveal vulnerabilities she typically kept hidden behind her professional armor. When Marcus finally agreed to her proposition, it wasn't with the enthusiasm of someone motivated purely by money. Instead, he seemed to understand that she was asking for help with something deeper than just social appearances. He wanted to know about dress codes, expected behavior, and the charitable cause being supported. His thoughtfulness about details revealed a consideration that went beyond mere professionalism. As they exchanged contact information and made arrangements for the following evening, Victoria felt a strange mixture of relief and anticipation. She had solved her immediate problem, but something about Marcus made her suspect that this transaction would be more complicated than she had planned. The way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't paying attention, the careful way he spoke about their arrangement, the genuine interest he showed in her well-being, all of it suggested that Marcus was not just another struggling student looking for quick money. There was depth to him, layers that she found herself wanting to understand. As Victoria left the diner that afternoon, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had just set something in motion that would extend far beyond a single evening. Marcus had agreed to help her, but she sensed that he was doing so for reasons that had little to do with the money she was offering. That night, as she prepared for the gala, Victoria found herself thinking not about the business contacts she would make or the charitable cause she would support, but about the mysterious young man who had agreed to stand by her side. She had hired Marcus to solve a problem, but she was beginning to suspect that he might become something much more significant than that. The stage was set for an evening that would challenge everything Victoria thought she knew about herself, about love, and about the assumptions we make about other people's lives. As she selected her dress and jewelry, she couldn't help but wonder what the next 24 hours would bring. The Metropolitan Museum of Art had been transformed into a glittering wonderland for the annual Philanthropy Gala. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over marble floors where New York's most influential figures mingled. Beneath priceless works of art, Victoria Sterling stood at the entrance, her emerald evening gown catching the light as she waited for her hired companion. When Marcus arrived, Victoria almost didn't recognize him. Gone was the modest waiter from the Brooklyn diner. In his place stood a man who looked like he had stepped from the pages of a luxury magazine. His tuxedo fit him perfectly, clearly tailored rather than rented, and he moved with the confident grace of someone completely comfortable in this rarefied environment. But it was more than just his appearance that had changed. As Marcus approached her, Victoria noticed that his entire demeanor had shifted. The slight deference he had shown in the diner had been replaced by the quiet authority of someone accustomed to moving in these circles. His handshake was firm, his smile warm but measured, and when he offered his arm, it was with the practiced ease of someone who had attended countless similar events. The evening began exactly as Victoria had planned. Marcus was the perfect companion, charming, articulate, and sophisticated enough to hold his own in conversations with senators, CEOs, and cultural luminaries. He seemed to possess an encyclopedic knowledge of art, literature, and world affairs. That impressed even Victoria's most intellectual acquaintances. What surprised her most was how natural it felt to be with him. The awkwardness she had expected from their unusual arrangement never materialized. Instead, Marcus seemed to anticipate her needs, offering support when she needed it and stepping back when she wanted to shine. He was attentive without being possessive, engaging without being overwhelming. As the evening progressed, Victoria found herself genuinely enjoying Marcus's company. His insights were thoughtful, his humor was intelligent, and he had a way of making her feel like the most interesting person in the room. When he spoke about the evening's charitable cause, funding for inner-city education programs, his passion was evident and deeply moving. The first hint that something was not as it seemed came when Victoria noticed how comfortable Marcus appeared with the event's most prominent attendees. He spoke with the mayor about urban development policies with the knowledge of someone who had clearly studied the issues extensively. When the evening's honoree, a renowned humanitarian, greeted Marcus by name, Victoria began to suspect that her hired companion was not exactly who he claimed to be. Her suspicions deepened when she observed Marcus navigating the complex social dynamics of the gala with an expertise that went far beyond natural charisma. He knew which philanthropists were rivals, which political figures were allies, and which business leaders were currently embroiled in controversies. This was not the knowledge of an outsider looking in, but of someone who belonged to this world. The turning point came during the evening's auction, when a rare manuscript was being offered for sale. Marcus made a casual comment about the piece's provenance that revealed an intimate knowledge of both the work and its history. When Victoria questioned him about it, he deflected with a charming smile, but she could see something shifting in his expression. As the gala reached its crescendo, Victoria found herself both enchanted and confused. Marcus had exceeded every expectation she had harbored, but she was beginning to realize that the man beside her was not the struggling graduate student she had hired. The way he moved through the crowd, the depth of his knowledge, the comfort he displayed in these surroundings, all of it suggested a background far more privileged than he had revealed. The revelation came in the most unexpected way. As they were leaving the museum, Victoria overheard a conversation between two prominent socialites discussing the evening's guests. One mentioned how wonderful it was to see young Dr. Harrison at the event, noting that it had been months since anyone had seen him in public following his family's tragic loss. Victoria's blood ran cold as she realized they were talking about Marcus. Dr. Harrison, she knew that name. Dr. Marcus Harrison was the heir to the Harrison Foundation, one of the most prestigious charitable organizations in the country. His family had been philanthropic royalty for generations, and Marcus himself was a renowned humanitarian with advanced degrees from Harvard and Oxford. The pieces began falling into place with devastating clarity. Marcus Harrison had disappeared. from public view 8 months earlier following a family tragedy that had been covered extensively in the society pages. His parents and younger sister had been killed in a car accident while traveling to one of their foundation's events. Marcus had inherited not just their vast fortune, but the responsibility of continuing their philanthropic legacy. The realization that she had hired one of the wealthiest and most accomplished men in New York to pose as her date was both humiliating and confusing. Why had he agreed to her proposition? Why was he working as a waiter in a Brooklyn diner? And most importantly, what did his deception mean for the feelings that had been growing between them throughout the evening? Victoria confronted Marcus outside the museum, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and hurt. She demanded to know why he had deceived her, why he had allowed her to believe he was someone he was not. The conversation that followed was raw and emotional, stripping away the pretenses that had defined their relationship. Marcus's explanation was both heartbreaking and illuminating. Following his family's death, he had been overwhelmed by grief and the crushing weight of expectation. The Harrison Foundation, the society events, the constant scrutiny, all of it had become unbearable. He had walked away from his privileged life, seeking anonymity and genuine human connection in ordinary places. Working at the diner had been his way of finding purpose without the burden of his family name. For the first time in his life, people interacted with him for who he was, rather than what he represented. When Victoria had approached him with her proposition, he had been intrigued not by the money, but by the opportunity to help someone who seemed as lonely and isolated as he felt. The evening had become real for him in a way he hadn't expected. Victoria's vulnerability, her intelligence, her strength in the face of professional pressures, all of it had touched something in him that had been dormant since his family's death. He had started the evening playing a role, but had ended it feeling more like himself than he had in months. Victoria's anger began to give way to understanding as she realized the depth of Marcus's pain and the courage it had taken for him to step back into the world he had fled. But she also grappled with feelings of manipulation and uncertainty. How much of their connection had been real, and how much had been based on deception? The conversation stretched into the early hours of the morning, with both Victoria and Marcus revealing truths about their lives that went far beyond their initial arrangement. Victoria spoke about the isolation that success had brought her, the way her wealth and position had become barriers to genuine intimacy. Marcus shared his struggle with survivor's guilt, his fear of stepping back into a public role that would force him to confront his family's absence. As dawn broke over the Manhattan skyline, Victoria found herself faced with a choice that would define the rest of her life. She could walk away from Marcus, treating their evening as the transaction it had begun as, or she could choose to see beyond the deception to the genuine connection that had developed between them. The decision became clear when she looked into Marcus's eyes and saw not the wealthy philanthropist or the humble waiter, but the man who had listened to her fears without judgment, who had supported her through an evening that had terrified her, and who had shown her that love could exist beyond the careful calculations that had defined her adult life. Victoria's choice to trust Marcus, despite the deception, marked the beginning of a relationship that would transform both of their lives. Marcus would eventually return to his philanthropic work, but with Victoria by his side, he would find the strength to honor his family's memory while building something new. Victoria would discover that the love she had been seeking was not found in the perfect arrangement she had tried to orchestrate, but in the messy, complicated, beautiful reality of two broken people choosing to heal together. Their story became a testament to the idea that sometimes the most profound connections come from the most unexpected places, and that love often arrives not when we're looking for it, but when we're brave enough to be vulnerable with another human being. As Victoria and Marcus walked hand in hand through the empty streets of Manhattan, the city awakening around them, they knew that their evening had ended not with a business transaction, but with the beginning of something that would change everything they thought they knew about love, trust, and the courage it takes to let someone truly see who we are beneath the roles we play. The millionaire businesswoman and the mysterious waiter had found in each other not just companionship, but the possibility of a love that transcended the barriers of wealth, status, and the careful facades that had protected them from the world and from themselves.
Thank you for watching this story unfold with us here on M&A The Story Unfolds. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new tale. We'd love to know where you're watching. Leave a comment below and tell us what part of the world you're joining us from. Your support means everything. See you in the next story.